I'm Laurie Call with Emerge. I am lucky enough to be here today with Matt Peopsel from the Predictive Index, who is the godfather of talent optimization. So Matt, if you would, what is talent optimization?
It's a great question, Laurie. It's the question I get most often, as you can imagine. So talent optimization is how we align our talent strategy with our business strategy to produce the best business results that we can. Now, what I love most about that definition is it really shows that we have to take the people part of business and the technical part of business and really put them on even footing, make them equally important. So that's kind of where it begins. When I'm giving a little bit of a longer definition, if I could, I'll tell you that it is a strategic process, talent optimization is, of unfolding and trying to maximize business results by optimizing the performance and the experience of every individual, every relationship, and every team inside the whole organization. Now let me break that down a little bit.
Please do.
So the first is that it's a strategic process. Talent optimization isn't an event. It's not a one-time thing that we do and just check the box and we're done and we never have to go back to it again, because organizations are constantly changing and evolving. So we have to work hard. We're bringing in new individuals onto the team. Maybe someone left. Maybe the charter or the job changed a little bit, or the entire strategy changed. You know, the business model, these things happen. So we always have to understand that it's a strategic process that gets unfolded. When we say we want to maximize business results, that's why we're in business. So we really want to make sure that we hit on the fact that even though we're going to be talking about people parts of the business, it is a business endeavor. Sometimes when we hear talent or people ops or culture, we think, oh, that's HR's job. No, no, no. This is the entire organization's job, and it's focused on delivering those exceptional business results. When we say we're optimizing the performance and the experience of people, it's because we can't have one but not the other. If we have high performance but poor experience, those people aren't going to stay. And if they're having a great experience, that's great, but if they're not performing, then we're not getting the job done. We can't have that either. So it's really, how do we optimize both the performance and the experience? And for what types of people? Every individual, every relationship inside the organization, every team that's operating. If anyone is not having an optimal set of performance or experience, then by definition, we're not optimal. We could be doing better. And so that's where it's a lengthy definition in that way, but when you break it apart piece by piece, then you start to understand exactly why it's just so important that we get it right.
Awesome. So next question I think we should focus on is, all right, we have our definition of talent optimization. That's awesome, but what does that actually look like?
Yeah, it's a great point. So when I'm drawing the framework of talent optimization, I always start with business strategy. And here you can think about what's the organization trying to accomplish in the next 12 to 18 months, for example. It's always forward looking. And then at the far end, we see business results. If we think about the last week or month or quarter, whatever it might be, the last fiscal year, then those are results that have manifested. But in the middle is the people part. And there are 4 aptitudes in the talent optimization discipline that really tell us what leaders at every level have to get right. The first is design winning teams. Team-based work is more important than ever. How do we design teams so that they can be successful? The second is, how do we hire top talent? We're always on the lookout for people who can perform at their best inside the business. How do we make those decisions? Then we want to talk about how do we inspire people to greatness? That's that privileged relationship that a manager or supervisor has with their direct report, or peers working together on a project. That all lives in the inspire aptitude. And then finally, diagnose. It's a medical sounding term, but one we chose very deliberately. How do we diagnose people problems that are affecting the business so that we can get them fixed? So taken together, design, hire, inspire, and diagnose are the people-centric practices that take place within the business context to make sure that our strategy, as frictionlessly as possible, translates into results.
So my next question for you is, a lot of times when people look at assessments and psychometrics and things like that, we only think about it in the term of we're using it for who we're bringing in.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about how the Predictive Index really nails that area and how they've revolutionized that to really make that hire piece very successful.
Yeah, when you think about a pre-hire assessment, how do we collect some information about a candidate in a very streamlined fashion? The Predictive Index typically takes a job candidate maybe 6 minutes or less to complete. So in a very short period of time, we can glean a lot of information about that candidate. It might help us tailor the interview a little bit. Maybe I want to dig in on specific areas where I'm seeing fits or gaps to the specific job target. That's a great place to start. But once we've actually used that information and maybe I have a large number of candidates, how do I prioritize who I want to talk to first? So I'd want to take those who appear to be the strongest fit for the role and start my interview there. That may not be the one who gets the job for a variety of reasons. The predictive index is one input to a more comprehensive hiring process, but it's a very efficient and a very effective way to get some information about the candidates. Once I've realized who I want to extend my offer to, the little trick here is that the predictive index also tells us what they might respond to most positively in terms of me making the offer. What can I accentuate about the role? And in a competitive job market, you really want to make sure that candidate says yes to you. So using every advantage you have can become pretty important. Once they actually take the job, how can we use the same information and not just throw it in a desk drawer or pretend we didn't ever learn it the way we do with too many pre-hire assessments, but instead, how do we use it to actually onboard the individual? How do we assimilate them onto their team that much more quickly? How do we use it to coach and develop them both in terms of their interaction with the rest of the group as well as toward their own job performance? The behavioral information that we collect through the pre-hire stage can pay so many dividends in the post-hire world as well.
When you say pre-hire assessment, there's probably a group of people that's like, oh, or they get all nervous about it and they, maybe are scared of it.
Sure.
So what makes the predictive index different when it comes to all those tools that are out there?
Yeah, anytime you're going to use a psychometric instrument like the predictive index in the context of what's known as a high stakes decision, for example, who to hire, then we want to make sure that it's valid, that it's reliable, that the people who are using it to make the most refined decisions have been well trained in how to use it, that it is suitable for the task, which in this case is adults at work. So once we are able to check those boxes the way that the predictive index certainly does, now the question is from a practical standpoint, how does the system itself fit into our natural workflow? So for example, some of our clients have chosen to integrate the predictive index invitation into their applicant tracking system. So it's almost frictionless to be able to say in the normal course of applying for the job, you're going to complete the behavioral assessment. Or, for example, when the system produces an interview guide, it gives you specific questions you might want to ask based on the apparent fit and less fit to the target of the job for that particular individual. These are helpful aspects of the system built around the assessment to be able to help clients get the hiring decision right.
So let's say I'm in a candidate for a position that you're hiring for, and you are going to send me the predictive index assessment.
That's right.
Maybe the behavioral, there's also the cognitive piece as well. What would you say to me as a test taker who's maybe a little bit nervous about this part of the application?
Yeah, I would say we want to make every effort to understand the people who work at our company so that we can help them perform at their best and have the best working experience for us. We want to make sure that as you're making your decision about where to work, we want to make an effective decision too about who we bring into the role. So we have a very brief survey, I always call it a survey, called the Predictive Index Behavioral Survey, and you'll be given an invitation. It should take you less than 5 or 6 minutes to complete. Please don't overthink it. It's just part of something that helps us make sure that we can help our people perform and have the best work experience possible.
And I know another really good benefit of the predictive index is that it's available in probably about 76 languages, is it now, or even more than that?
Yeah, right around 70 languages, that's right.
So I know I can take it in the language that I think in or that I'm most comfortable with.
Right.
But there's also the cognitive piece of the hiring portion as well. Can you talk to me a little bit about that?
Yeah, the cognitive assessment's a little bit different. It takes 12 minutes to complete, and it's a chance to come in and help us understand how quickly the candidate processes information, and that can be important in certain types of jobs. So for example, when you set a behavioral target for the role, we've talked about that to this point, you might also set a cognitive target for the role, which says we want to understand and prioritize candidates based on their apparent fit in terms of their cognitive ability and the speed in which they process that type of information. So it's a very different kind of assessment, but it produces a very effective outcome.
So let's say I've taken the assessments, we've determined I'm a good fit, everything else is good, I join your company. You've worked with clients for 10 years and you've talked and you've seen the issues that they've had or ways they've used the predictive index. Once I become an employee, where do you really see the benefit? Like, talk to me about what a lot of those clients are coming to you with questions on or where you've seen good things happen.
Yeah, the very first thing I want to do on day one with my new hire is to make sure to use some of the tools like a manager strategy guide to be able to produce that for that individual and say, based on your predictive index behavioral survey result, what we know is this is how you'd like to be managed. And so over the next 30, 60, 90 days of our time together, I'm going to be checking in with you to make sure that I'm meeting these needs. Where am I doing an effective job for you? Where could I be doing a better job for you? It reinforces the fact that the pre-hire assessment that I took was not just a pre-hire assessment. You're actually fulfilling the promise you made to me that you're using this information to help me perform and to have the best experience possible. So that's an example. The other is I'm going to introduce you to your team members. Well, I have predictive index survey results for them too. I know your most extroverted team members, for example, probably want to take you to lunch to welcome you. I know your less extroverted people may not exactly think that's great. So I can tailor the way that I assimilate you into the team and help you develop those working relationships based not just on what I know about you, what I know about myself, but what I know about every one of your coworkers as well. So you can do a more effective job of onboarding to make someone feel comfortable, to feel like they can accelerate that process that's sometimes called forming, storming, norming, and performing. That can all go a lot faster in terms of having the data and the tools available to accomplish that.
So with the work that you've been doing with your clients for so long, where do you get the most questions, or where do you see this keeps coming up and here's how we've solved it with the predictive index?
A lot of the more experienced clients have mastered the areas of hiring. They know how to use it effectively and efficiently in their hiring process. They've started to have some success with some of the Inspire tools to maybe use some of the basic tools for manager relationships. Where I get the most questions today, by far, Laurie, is team-based work. Teams are very challenging right now. And the reason in part is because we've had so much change in the external environment. We've also had change inside of companies. So if you go through a reorg, for example, how are we going to do this work? It's all totally different. We've juggled up our teams. We've changed the team charters. Everyone's kind of fumbling about trying to reestablish ways of working. And so what we can do is to understand where are behavioral team dynamics helping us and potentially hindering us from being able to achieve our goals. And there's two things I see over and over again. One is competing goals, and the other is competing styles. Competing goals happens when I want things that are maybe seem opposed to one another. For example, maybe I want innovation, but I also want quality. Well, those are naturally competing things. Innovation is all about going fast and being agile and dealing with uncertainty and making mistakes, but quality is all about predictability and reliability and all of these things. So how could I get both? That's hard to navigate. Or what about running the analytic, technical aspects of the business, but what about people who have social needs and they want to make sure their coworkers are taken care of? Those can be competing goals as well. Then when you layer in competing styles, I use the earlier example of somebody who's extroverted versus somebody who's less extroverted, naturally competing styles about how they're going to take action, communicate, make decisions. There are other examples as well. Maybe some people are more formal in their work. They really need a hard and fast definition of what right and wrong looks like. Others who are more fast and loose and might feel like that's actually restricting to them. And so when you start to see competing styles in the context of competing goals, it's all out competition.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the areas where I see a lot of my clients having maybe some, not like friction, but maybe just some tension is when we have someone who's naturally an ideas person. And they like to chase new ideas and new initiatives. And then we have people that are strong in process and precision. And those two people can really push each other the wrong way or hit the wrong buttons.
And let's think about what that means.
Yeah.
I have needs. I have needs to be a free spirit. I have needs to be experimental, to go fast. Well, I have needs too. My needs are that we don't make mistakes. My needs are that we understand, what quality and efficiency look like. There's rules for a reason. I have needs too. So how do you negotiate those needs? And what I say is the best time to do that is to pre-negotiate before you get into the big project. Hey, we have different styles. Maybe we have different objectives. If this comes up in our working relationship together, how are we going to handle it? That's the time to deal with it, not when the project's late and everybody's kind of frustrated with one another. You can do it then too, but it's a lot more costly and a lot more challenging if you haven't done the work up front.
And I think when you're talking about I have needs and all of this, sometimes we don't really know what our natural styles are. So this self-awareness piece where PI can come in and say, this is how you're showing up and this is how you impact other people is really important. Hugely
important. And so when we think about optimization, as we talked about just a little bit ago, when we want to have the highest levels of performance and experience possible, well, how do we do that? Well, the answer is there's a 3-part talent optimization methodology, which is awareness, insight, and action. And you're making a great point, which is all about awareness. If we don't have self-awareness, nothing downstream is going to get any better. So when we start with awareness, how do we use data? How do we use simple visualizations to create attention to something, like what my natural needs are? But the insight bit, which comes second, is how is this affecting my work? And what might I do differently now that I know what I know? That's all within that insight phase. Once you start to develop a range of options, how will you put that into practice through action? And so now it's like, if I know that my natural tendency, as it is, as a persuader, is to be a little fast and loose, but I have people on my team who need those rules, the process and precision type people. All of a sudden, how's this showing up in your work? Well, my team's a little uncomfortable with me when I just go to the whiteboard and start scribbling furiously and I just talk about what I want. I never write anything down. And they've actually complained that it doesn't help them be at their best. And I don't like that as a leader. I don't want to feel that I'm not doing everything I can for my people. What might you do differently? Well, I suppose I could take the extra 5 minutes to actually document, write an email, create a team charter, whatever it might be, to capture the details of what I need, and that might help them feel that they've got those guardrails that really are, I may not need it, but that's what they need. So as a leader, it's my responsibility to create that. So that's a very simple example of going from awareness to insight to action when someone has a different style than me.
And what you're really talking about is the platinum rule.
The platinum rule, exactly right. And the platinum rule of not just doing unto others as you would have done to you, but what is it that they want? And leadership isn't about what you want. It's not about you at all. It's about their needs and fulfilling those needs in the context of the mission. So to me, I love that example of the platinum rule. How do we translate the platinum rule into action? That's the real crux.
So management is hard,
Definitely.
as it is, and add on all of these other things that are going on in the world, it gets even harder and trickier and more nuanced. And we're now entering a world of work where a lot of times we might have never even seen our manager in real life, like in person.
Definitely happens.
So how can we use PI in this remote and hybrid world that we are seeing more and more often?
Yeah, we need to recognize the fact that remote work is just a different format of work. We still have the same basic human needs. The work still needs to get done. We still need collaboration and cooperation, communication. All these things still have to happen. How we do them has to change a little bit, though. If I have a highly extroverted team member, for example, I need to know that maybe my normally scheduled Zoom meetings aren't enough. I need to come up with some mechanism of, can I text them? Can I use Slack or Microsoft Teams? Can I call them, periodically? Would they mind if I drop in? And I go out of my way to break down distance for those people who need that. Well, what about for people who are more introverted? And we're just going to have a team session, and as a team leader, if I didn't set up the exercise properly, I say, all right, everybody, I need your ideas. Well, they're going to get completely steamrolled in that distance format of remote work. So instead, I need to take the extra 5 minutes to create a whiteboard virtual equivalent so people can put their ideas out in a more safe, more timely environment, as opposed to just being shouted down by the more extroverted members of my team. So what you're hearing from me is that, yes, things have changed, the work format has changed, and as leaders, as users of the PI tools, we have to take the data and the insights they provide to make better decisions and to create an environment in which our people can succeed. We can absolutely do that at distance just as easily as we can in the office. Too many times I see people not doing either.
So we can use the predictive index to get people in the right positions, to have them have a better relationship with their manager and other team members, to have great team dynamics and to boost that engagement. I'm sure you've seen PI used in a bunch of different ways over the years, but what is the most fun way you've seen these behavioral assessments leveraged?
Yeah, one of the things I love most is seeing something as simple as the placards, which are a very simple way of communicating what my basic needs are, how to work with me. And it's a very simple, very visual, easy to interpret diagram. And you can produce one for everybody in your organization. If you're remote, you put it on your company's equivalent of an intranet. If you're in a physical space, you can just print them out and tape them up to the walls. It generates this natural curiosity about what people how they're wired and what makes them tick and what they really need from each of us at work. So I think that as far as creating a common language, that's one of the simplest methods that you can think of. For others, what I've seen is trying to use team identity. So going into the team tools, configuring the team, what we're trying to accomplish, and finding out that we have different types of teams. Maybe we're an exploring team or a pathfinding team or a stabilizing team. And the PI tools give us information and posters we can use to celebrate the fact that we have an identity as this type of a team. And in my own research, I found that team identification drives high levels of team commitment and team performance. But there's so few examples of, well, how do I do that? Here's an answer right here that the PI software gives us. Let's utilize it. One thing that I get asked a lot is about the diagnose module, which is all about when we take an assessment of our company, how are we doing in terms of our level of performance, our level of employee experience? What is it that makes someone frustrated at work, if you will? And sometimes I joke that it comes down to one of four things. I hate my job, I hate my boss, I hate my teammates, or I hate this whole place, right? And the reason I joke about it that way is because every one of the items that we typically include in an experience survey, for example, is your experience at work, it points back to one of those things. Job fit. Is my manager treating me with the platinum rule, the way you brought up earlier? My teammates, do we have healthy and constructive, productive working relationships? Or from the organization's perspective, how do I feel about our culture and about our leadership? What I love most about PI's approach to the diagnostic tool that is what's known as the XP or the Experience Survey, then it points back to other parts of the talent optimization platform we can use to actually make things better. How many times have we seen employee engagement surveys come back and say, well, these people aren't happy, and don't do anything about it? It's actually worse than if we were to do something. But what do we do about it? The talent optimization system is so self-referential that it points us back to places we've skipped. If we see people are frustrated with their jobs, do we need to go back to the hire module and figure out how to look at job targets? If people are frustrated with the manager, are we using the inspired tools the way we should? Same is true with the team dynamic. The team tools from design can help us improve engagement scores when our team-based relationships are causing us frustration. So I feel like the diagnostic module, which takes a look at what's your recent experience been like in your job role, is a very powerful way of seeing where did we skip steps that are preventing us from achieving that optimization vision of ours.
And what I like about, you said so many times we have an experience survey that goes out. It may be, lukewarm or not great, and we don't do anything about it.
Right.
But what I like about what I've seen with clients using Diagnose is they get the insights, what you said before, then they take action. So there's those recommendations, and then they're going to do the the experience survey again.
Yes, yeah, you take it periodically. And if, let's say your organization's pretty stable, which I don't know many that are right now, based on market conditions, but if it were fairly stable, maybe you do it annually, because it is a little bit of effort to do it.
Yep.
But if things are changing rapidly, maybe we've had a reorg, maybe we might do it every 6 months. So then all of a sudden we can check in and say, are we making progress? And the message you're sending back to your workforce is that your opinion matters, your well-being matters, your job performance certainly matters, and we're doing and taking the steps and we're using a thoughtful approach to make sure we're doing everything we can for you. That's a very powerful thing to say in a job market that seems to be more fickle than ever.
And you talk about the thoughtful approach. So tell me a little bit about how the questions for the survey are chosen and put together.
Yeah, there's an entire science battery behind it that evaluates the questions that are predictive of employee engagement. You always want to make sure that we have an assessment that actually predicts what it sets out to measure. But also each of them is mapped to one of the modules, as I shared a little bit earlier. So what happens is when the survey results come back for a given leader, we'll present the areas where they had strong responses, because we want to celebrate those things, but also some areas where there's room for improvement. But we don't want to just say, hey, there's room for improvement here. Good luck.
Yeah.
You want to basically say, here's what you can do about it.
Yep.
And so that's where I feel like helping close the loop of the awareness, insight, action, and best case, involve the team. What might we do as a team to improve these scores? Not just as the leader, I went back and I thought about it, and here's what we're going to do. Like, no, that doesn't allow your team members to have some real agency and some real input into what we're going to do differently. So I feel like it's a really way to be surgical and focus us in on a small number of things we could improve that are going to have a big impact. And it also prompts us to start that action stage with the help of our team.
So we talk about improving the engagement scores and that this is really the goal of all of it, but why does improving engagement matter?
Yeah, engagement is critically important for a couple of reasons. One is that people have choices about how much effort they're going to put in, how cordial they're going to be with their team members, how likely they are to step in to help somebody when they need help. All of these are outcomes that are dependent on how engaged they are. The other is loyalty. If you lose a performer on your team because they were having poor engagement issues, well, you have to hire somebody. That's going to take time. Then they have to come in and learn the job. That takes time. The team dynamic has to re-gel, which takes time. And meanwhile, all that time, guess where all that work lands? On the team leader. And so they're like, I was busy before. I didn't carve out and plan on hiring and rehiring for this top performer. It would have been a heck of a lot easier if I had just ensured everybody was having as positive of an engagement experience that they could.
And there's a significant cost.
Huge cost.
To this
Huge
as
cost.
well.
We never do the numbers right when we calculate the costs. There's both the direct cost of having to potentially put out job ads and go through the process of taking people's time to conduct interviews. There's the opportunity cost of what was the person going to have been working on. Oh, they just did our Google ads for us. Oh my gosh, you could be affecting the business because we don't have somebody who's as effectively doing it, and now we're going to have ramp time. Like, all these things really add up very quickly.
One of the other things we were talking about a little bit earlier today was when you put an investment into a PI subscription, you see that come out tenfold.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely the benchmark that I fully expect. You should expect to see a 10x return on your talent optimization investment, which sounds like a lot. I don't know, there's not many things you could invest in and get a 10x return on it. But because we're talking about the people part of business, it is inordinately expensive. In many companies, the people part of the ledger is absolutely the most expensive part of the business, bar none. And they're also the biggest opportunity to drive the highest levels of top line growth or whatever it is that we might be looking to do. So it might sound to the uninitiated as if that's a big number, 10x, but what you realize is that a little can go a long way. When we start to introduce talent optimization tools like Predictive Index and talent optimization practices like those that the PI tells us that we should do, then we can expect and deliver those 10x returns, which is an outsized return on the investment for getting it right. And some companies I've seen go as high as 12, 15 times return on investment because they get so good at the people part, they can actually do things their competition can't. They can be more agile in the marketplace. They can start to push change through their organizations faster because they have the people practices and capabilities to back it up.
Awesome. Well, I am bought in. I'm a customer. I haven't used the Predictive Index before, but I'm coming to you and I'm saying, where do I start?
Yep, I'd say predictiveindex.com and talk to your certified partner. If you have one that you've worked with in the past or if someone refers you, absolute best way to get exactly what you need, all your questions answered, and to be able to understand how talent optimization can transform your business on top of the PI toolset.
Matt, thanks for coming and spending some time with us all the way from Cape Cod. We appreciate you sharing your insights as the Godfather of Talent Optimization. I am Laurie Call. Thank you for tuning in to Emerge TV.